Katie. We have The Hidden Staircase. So, chapter 20. This is the last chapter. Nancy's Victory. Their initial fright over, both girls turned and beamed their flashlights toward the foot of the stone stairway. Below them stood a short, unshaven, pudgy man with watery blue eyes. "You're the ghost!" Helen stammered. "And you're Mr. Willie Wharton," Nancy added. Astounded, the man blinked in the glaring lights, then said, "Yes, I am. But how did you know?" "You live in the old Riverview Manor," Helen went on, "and you've been stealing food and silver and jewelry from Twin Elms." No, I'm not a thief," Willie Wharton cried out. "I took some food, and I've been trying to scare the old ladies so they would sell their property. Sometimes I wore false faces, but I never took any jewelry or silver. Honest, I didn't. It must have been Mr. Gomber." Nancy and Helen were amazed. Willie Wharton, with little urging from them, was confessing more than they had dared to hope. "Did you know that Nathan Gomber's a thief?" Nancy asked the man. Wharton shook his head. "I know he's sharp. That's why he was going to get me more money for my property from the railroad." "Mr. Wharton, did you sign the original contract of sale?" Nancy queried. "Yes, I did, but Mr. Gomber said that if I disappeared for a while, he'd fix everything up so I'd get more money. He said he had a couple of other jobs I could help him with. One of them was coming here to play ghost. It was a good place to disappear to. But I wish I'd never seen Nathan Gomber or Riverview Manor or Twin Elms or had anything to do with ghosts." "I'm glad to hear you say that," said Nancy. Then suddenly she asked, "Where's my father?" Willie Wharton shifted his weight and looked about wildly. "I don't know. Really, I don't." "But you kidnapped him in your car," the young sleuth prodded him. "We got a description of you from the taxi man." Several seconds went by before Willie Wharton answered. "I didn't know it was kidnapping. Mr. Gomber said your father was ill and he was going to take him to a special doctor. He said Mr. Drew was coming on a train from Chicago and was going to meet Mr. Gomber on the road halfway between here and the station. But Gomber said he couldn't meet him, had other business to attend to. So I was to follow your father's taxi and bring him to Riverview Manor." Yes, go on," Nancy urged, as Willie Wharton stopped speaking and covered his face with his hands. "I didn't expect your father to be unconscious when I picked him up," Wharton went on. "Well, those men in the taxi put Mr. Drew in the back of my car and I brought him here. Mr. Gomber drove up from the other direction and said he would take over. He told me to come right here to Twin Elms and do some ghosting." "And you have no idea where Mr. Gomber took my father?" Nancy asked with a sinking feeling. "Nope." In a few words, she pointed out Nathan Gomber's real character to Willie Wharton, hoping that if the man before her knew anything about Mr. Drew's whereabouts, which he was not telling, he would confess. But from Wharton's emphatic answers and sincere offers to be of all the help he could in finding the missing lawyer, Nancy concluded that Wharton was not withholding any information. "How did you find out about this passageway and the secret staircases?" Nancy questioned him. "Gomber found an old notebook under a heap of rubbish in the attic of Riverview Manor," Wharton answered. "He said it told everything about the secret entrances to the two houses. The passageways, with openings on each floor, were built when the houses were. They were used by the original Turnbulls in bad weather to get from one building to another. This stairway was for the servants. The other two stairways were for the family. One of these led to Mr. Turnbull's bedroom in this house. The notebook also said that he often secretly entertained government agents, and sometimes he had to hurry them out of the parlor and hide them in the passageway when callers came." "Where's the stairway lead?" Helen spoke up. "To the attic of Twin Elms," Willie Wharton gave a little chuckle. "I know, Miss Drew, that you almost found the entrance. But the guys that built this place were pretty clever. Every opening has heavy double doors. When you poked that screwdriver through the crack, you thought you were hitting another wall, but it was really a door." "Did you play the violin and turn on the radio and make that thumping noise in the attic? And were you the one who laughed when you were up there?" "Yes, and I moved the sofa to scare you, and I even knew about the listening post. That's how I found out all your plans and could report them to Mr. Gomber." Suddenly, it occurred to Nancy that Nathan Gomber might appear on the scene at any moment. She must get Willie Wharton away and have him swear his to his signature before he changed his mind. "Mr. Wharton, would you please go ahead of us up the stairway and open the doors?" she asked. "And go to Twin Elms with us and talk to Mrs. Turnbull and Mrs. Hayes? I want you to tell them that you've been playing ghost, but you aren't going to any longer. Miss Flora has been so frightened that she's ill and in bed." "I'm sorry about that," Willie Wharton replied. "Sure, I'll go with you. I never want to see Nathan Gomber again." He went ahead of the girls and took down the heavy wooden bar from across the door. He swung it wide, pulled a metal ring in the back of the adjoining door, then quickly stepped downward. The narrow panel opening which Nancy had suspected of leading to the secret stairway now was pulled inward. There was barely room alongside it to go up the top steps and into the attic. To keep Gomber from becoming suspicious if he should arrive, Nancy asked Willie Wharton to close the secret door again. "Helen," said Nancy, "will you please run downstairs ahead of Mr. Wharton and me and tell Miss Flora and Aunt Rosemary the good news?" She gave Helen a 3-minute start, then she and Willie Wharton followed. The amazed women were delighted to have the mystery solved, but there was no time for celebration. "Mr. Barradell is downstairs to see you, Nancy," Aunt Rosemary announced. Nancy turned to Willie Wharton. "Will you come down with me, please?" She introduced both herself and the missing property owner to Mr. Barradell, then went on. "Mr. Wharton says his signature on the contract of sale is his own." And you will swear to that?" the lawyer asked, turning to Willie. "I sure will. I don't want anything more to do with this underhanded business," Willie Wharton declared. "I know where I can find a notary public right away," Nancy spoke up. "Do you want me to phone him, Mr. Barradell?" "Please do, at once." Nancy dashed to the telephone and dialed the number of Albert Watson on Tuttle Road. When he answered, she told him the urgency of the situation, and he promised to come over at once. Mr. Watson arrived within 5 minutes with his notary equipment. Mr. Barradell showed him the contract of sale containing Willie Wharton's name and signature. Attached to it was a certificate of acknowledgement. Mr. Watson asked Willie Wharton to raise his right hand and swear that he was the person named in the contract of sale. After this was done, the notary public filled in the proper places on the certificate, signed it, stamped the paper, and affixed his seal. "Well, this really is a wonderful job, Miss Drew," Mr. Barradell praised her. Nancy smiled, but her happiness at having accomplished the task for her father was dampened by the fact that she still did not know where he was. Mr. Barradell and Willie Wharton were also extremely concerned. "I'm going to call Captain Rossdale and ask him to send some policemen out here at once," Nancy stated. "What better place for Mr. Gomber to hide my father than somewhere along that passageway? How far does it go, Mr. Wharton?" "Mr. Gomber says it goes all the way to the river, but the end of it is completely stoned up now. I never went any farther than the stairways." The young lawyer thought Nancy's idea was a good one, because if Nathan Gomber should return to Riverview Manor and find Willie was gone, he would try to escape. The police promised to come at once. Nancy had just finished talking with Captain Rossland when Helen Corning called from the second floor. "Nancy, can you come up here? Miss Flora insists upon seeing the hidden staircase." The young sleuth decided that she would just about have time to do this before the arrival of the police. Excusing herself to Mr. Barradell, she ran up the stairs. Aunt Rosemary had put on a rose-colored dressing gown while attending to her mother. To Nancy's amazement, Mrs. Turnbull was fully dressed and wore a white blouse with a high collar and a black skirt. Nancy and Helen led the way to the attic. There, the girl detective, crouching on her knees, opened the secret door. "All these years I never knew it was there!" Miss Flora exclaimed. "And I doubt my father did, or he would have mentioned it," Aunt Rosemary added. Nancy closed the secret door, and they all went downstairs. She could hear the front doorbell ringing and assumed it was the police. She and Helen hurried below. Captain Rossdale and another officer stood there. They said other men had surrounded Riverview Manor, hoping to catch Nathan Gomber if he did arrive there. With Willie Wharton leading the way, the girls, Mr. Barradell, and the police trooped into the attic and went down the hidden staircase to the dank passageway below. "I have a hunch from reading about old passageways there may be one or more rooms off this tunnel," Nancy told Captain Rossdale. There were so many powerful flashlights in play now that the group was almost as bright as daylight. As the group moved along, they suddenly came to a short stairway. Willie Wharton explained that this led to an opening back of the sofa in the parlor. There was still another stone stairway which went up to Miss Flora's bedroom with an opening alongside the fireplace. The searchers went on. Nancy, who was ahead of the others, discovered a padlocked iron door in the wall. Was it a dungeon? She had heard of such places being used for prisoners in colonial times. By this time, Captain Rossdale had caught up to her. "Do you think your father may be in there?" he asked. "I'm terribly afraid so," said Nancy, shivering at the thought of what she might find. The officer found that the lock was quite rusty. Pulling from his pocket a penknife with various tool attachments, he soon had the door unlocked and flung wide. He beamed his light into the blackness beyond. It was indeed a room without windows. Suddenly Nancy cried out, "Dad!" and sprang ahead. Lying on blankets on the floor, and covered with others, was Mr. Drew. He was murmuring faintly. "He's alive!" Nancy exclaimed, kneeling down to pat his face and kiss him. "He's been drugged," Captain Rossland observed. "I'd say Nathan Gomber has been giving your father just enough food to keep him alive and mixing sleeping powders in with it." From his trousers pocket, the officer brought out a small vial of restorative and held it to Mr. Drew's nose. In a few moments, the lawyer shook his head, and a few seconds later opened his eyes. "Keep talking to your dad," the captain ordered Nancy. "Dad, wake up! You're all right! We've rescued you!" Within a very short time, Mr. Drew realized that his daughter was kneeling beside him. Reaching out his arms from beneath the blankets, he tried to hug her. "We'll take him upstairs," said Captain Rossland. "Willie, open that secret entrance in the parlor." Glad to be of help, Wharton hurried ahead and up the short flight of stairs. In the meantime, the other three men lifted Mr. Drew and carried him along the passageway. By the time they reached the stairway, Willie Wharton had opened a secret door behind the sofa in the parlor. Mr. Drew was placed on the couch. He blinked, looked around, and then said in astonishment, "Willie Wharton, how did you get here? Nancy, tell me the whole story." The lawyer's robust health and sturdy constitution had stood him in great stead. He recovered with amazing rapidity from his ordeal, and listened in rapt attention as one after the other of those in the room related the events of the past few days. As the story ended, there was a knock on the front door, and another police officer was admitted. He had come to report to Captain Rossland that not only had Nathan Gomber been captured outside Riverview Manor, and all the loot recovered, but that the final member of the group who had abducted Mr. Drew had been taken into custody. Gomber had admitted everything, even to having attempted to injure Nancy and her father with the truck at River Heights' bridge project. He had tried to frighten Miss Flora into selling Twin Elms because he had planned to start a housing project on the 2 Turnbull properties. "It's a real victory for you," Nancy's father praised his daughter proudly. The young sleuth smiled. Although she was glad it was all over, she could not help but look forward to another mystery to solve. One soon came her way, when, quite accidentally, she found herself involved in the bungalow mystery. Miss Flora and Aunt Rosemary had come downstairs to meet Mr. Drew. While they were talking to him, the police officer left, taking Willie Wharton with him as prisoner. Mr. Barradale also said goodbye. Nancy and Helen slipped out of the room and went to the kitchen. "We'll prepare a super-duper lunch to celebrate this occasion," said Helen happily. "And we can make all the plans we want," Nancy replied with a grin. "There won't be anyone at the listening post." And that's the book. That's The Hidden Staircase. I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll start recording the next book for you. I think it's The Hidden Bungalow, or The Bungalow Mystery. They referenced it at the very last page. Oh, it's The Bungalow Mystery. So I'll start that at some point. It's good reading to you, Katie.